Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 25th of October, 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, 8 million ETH staked on the Beacon chain. This is a lot of ETH. I think it's over $30 billion worth of ETH, around 6-7% of the current supply, which is pretty crazy, right? Now, I think that at time of recording, it's just almost 8 million actually staking, because I was looking at the deposit contract when I tweeted this out. And the difference is that when you deposit to the deposit contract, you basically go into the deposit queue, and then you're not staking straight away. You have to kind of like wait if there's a queue to get your deposit in. So technically that ETH is not being staked, but it is in the queue and it will be staked. And then there's also kind of like validators that have been slashed, right? And then they get kicked out of the validator set, or they've been offline for too long and they get leaked out. They will also be shown in the deposit contract, but they won't be shown as kind of like validating and staking. So there's different ways to kind of look at this. You can look at the deposit contract itself and see how much ETH has ever actually gone into the deposit contract, which means it has been staked at some point in time. And then you can look at kind of like how much is actively staked right now. I just look at the deposit contract on Etherscan. Like I Google like ETH2 deposit contract, go to the contract on Etherscan and see the number in there. And then I also go to Beacon Chain, so Beacon CHA.IN, which is like a block explorer, I guess, for the Beacon chain. I guess a validator explorer, and it'll show you how much the active stake is there. It's one of my favorite places to look at. But the reason why I look at the deposit contract is because it's for the total ETH staked ever, is because it's a one-way bridge right now. You can't actually withdraw from that contract at all. You can't withdraw from staking. The only way you can stop staking is either stop staking as in get kicked out of the validator set and not be able to re-enter, is if you kind of get slashed or if you kind of get leaked out. Right now, I don't think this has been changed. I haven't looked at this in quite a while, but I think it remains the same. If you go offline for long enough for your balance to bleed down to 28 ETH, so obviously you start at 32 ETH or above, right? If you've earned some ETH, say you start at 33 because you've earned some. But if you go offline for long enough and then you bleed down to 28 ETH, which takes a while, but if you get there, you'll be automatically ejected from the current validator set, and you won't be able to restake because of the fact that there's no withdrawals or deposits or anything like that. You can't move the funds around. So you'd have to kind of like do a fresh new 32 ETH validator. But that's just temporary until the withdrawals are enabled after the merge and things like that. But hopefully that gives you extra context. I had people ask me about this. I just wanted to provide some context there. But how cool is it that, that's a lot of ETH. Like, it's funny. Sometimes people will say, oh, there's other networks that have like 60, 70% of their whole value kind of like staked. And I do want to stress a couple of things here. One, all the other networks aren't running Ethereum's proof of stake. They're either running delegated proof of stake, which is DPoS, which is very different. And also they're worth a lot less. Like 8%, let's just say 8 million ETH, right, being worth $33 billion, I think, at the current prices, is worth much more than some other network that has like a $10 billion total market cap, but 80% is staked, right? So if 80% is staked, then it's $8 billion, whereas 80% for ETH would be much more than that. And I actually expect, I don't know if ETH is going to get to 80% staked or anything like that, but I do expect, once the merge is done, once withdrawals are enabled, and all that sort of stuff, and once the kind of like unburnt fee revenue is going to stakers instead of going to miners right now, I do expect that ETH stake to keep kind of crawling up. It's probably going to settle around 20 or 30 million. There are people who have this thesis that all ETH is going to be staked because you'll be able to get staking derivatives, so something like an ST ETH token, and it just makes logical sense for all ETH to be staked and everyone just to use the a kind of stake token. But I don't think it's going to be all of the ETH for various different reasons. But even if it is the majority, say it's like 70% or 80% of ETH, it's going to take a very long time to get there, I believe. So we're going to have to see how that shakes out. But it's still really cool to see that 8 million has been staked, given that it's a one-way bridge right now. For most stake, there are ways around this. You can just go through Lido and you can still get ST ETH. Yes, it's not validating on your own. It's not fully decentralized, anything like that. But you can still do that, and there are some exchanges that will offer you instant liquidity as well. I think most exchanges do, but in terms of like the ETH actually being locked in, kind of like the deposit contract. It's all locked there. It doesn't matter if they give you early, if the service provider gives you early liquidity or not. So hopefully that gives you a bunch of context around this kind of like number here. And, you know, it can only be up only right now in terms of going into the deposit contract. In terms of actually being actively staked, that can vary for the reasons I mentioned. But I'm pretty sure like 99% of the ETH that has ever gone into the deposit contract is actively staking right now, or is in queue to actively stake. I don't think there's been that many slashings. I don't think there's been that many people I don't even know if there's actually been anyone who has been offline long enough to get down to 28 ETH to get kicked out of the active validator set. Maybe they have. I haven't checked, but I haven't heard about it. So but it might be something worth looking into for sure. All right, a tweet here from Jane Manchun Wong, who leaks, or maybe works for Twitter, but leaks a lot of new Twitter features here. So she put out a tweet yesterday saying Twitter is working on a collectibles profile tab, NFT view, and NFT details view. So this is Twitter just, I guess, embracing NFTs more than what they already have. You can see here that there's a collectibles kind of like view when you go to like your profile, and you can kind of see the different, I guess, collectibles in there. There's an ape CryptoPunk, and you can click in and see, you know, if it was verified on OpenSea, the description, the creator, the properties, collection. So I guess this is their way of kind of, I guess, working around like fakes, because people were kind of debating about being able to kind of like set a fake NFT as your profile picture when Twitter rolls out putting NFTs as your profile pictures natively. People were saying, well, you can just fake it if there's no way to, I guess, check the authenticity of it. Well, this fixes that, right? Like you can check it. There'll probably be a link to like Etherscan or to OpenSea directly or somewhere else where you can actually check if that person actually owns the NFT that they have as their profile picture. So cool to see that. And it's just generally really cool to see that Twitter really is leaning into these kind of features. It's funny because like they haven't just got it with Ethereum, they've got it with Bitcoin as well. I mean, they integrated Bitcoin for tipping through some custodial Lightning Network thing. I'm sure that Ethereum will be coming along those lines as well. And they're obviously doing NFTs, which Ethereum is pretty much a big part of as well. So it's just cool because none of the other social medias have done anything besides Reddit. They did like a small experiment with the donuts and with like the bricks, I think it was, for 2 different subreddits. And they've also kind of said that they're building out a kind of like scalability solution for that using Arbitrum's tech. But other than that, I mean, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, like any of these other social platforms are not integrating crypto in any way right now. I'm sure they're thinking about it. Like it makes a lot of sense for most of them to do NFT stuff. Like it actually makes total sense for Instagram to integrate some NFT marketplace where people can just essentially create NFTs out of their work, sell them to people directly, and then Instagram will take a cut from that. I'm sure they're looking into that. I'm sure they're going to work on that, but they're lagging. They definitely are. And Twitter just seems to be embracing it at a much quicker pace. And it's not because Twitter, I guess, is that much smaller than a lot of these things. Maybe smaller than Facebook, of course, but Twitter has a lot of users, right? Like hundreds of millions of monthly active users, and it's been growing like crazy over the past couple of years. Everyone used, I mean, not everyone, but like a lot of people use Twitter to keep up with things, especially if you're in crypto. Like you can't be in crypto and not use Twitter. I know there's bad sides to Twitter and it gets annoying at times, but generally it's where everyone kind of congregates, for better or worse. So yeah, it's cool to see Twitter leaning into the NFT stuff more here. So Justin Drake put out a chart here which he called ultrasound exponential, which is basically showing the daily Ethereum fee volume over time. Now, actually, I'm trying to get like a bigger picture up here for you guys to see. I guess it's just the bottom left that's cut off by my camera, but you can basically see that over time, the daily Ethereum fee kind of like volume has only been increasing. Now, a lot of you watching the refuel, the types of people to say, oh, isn't this bearish because like it's pricing users out because you guys know that we have the layer 2 ecosystem to scale Ethereum. I actually think this is incredibly bullish. And as I've said before, I expect this is a logarithmic chart, but I expect this to go kind of up to $1 billion daily fee revenue at one point. It's probably not going to be consistently that for quite a while, but the trend is up, and I don't think there's actually a ceiling here. I think that as the kind of like users get more high value, as there's more kind of like as there's more people kind of like playing with the network, trying to extract value out of it, you're going to get people willing to pay almost the entirety of the economic value that they're extracting out of it as a fee. So for example, if you need to pay the entire, like say you're doing an arbitrage and you need to pay 99% of the profit as a fee, you're still going to take that bet because you still get 1% profit at the end of the day. And that adds up over time. Like for arbitrage transactions, they're happening all the time. So you're more than happy to pay 99% or close to it. Maybe not 99%, maybe somewhere between 95 and 99%. You're very happy to pay that in fees to extract that 1 to 5% worth of actual profit from it. And this happens all the time. It's not just arbitrage, it's also front running and sandwich attacks, which is part of MEV, which obviously is not great. It's kind of like toxic, but it still happens at the end of the day. And just given that, and given the fact that there's a lot of actors on the network as such as layer 2s that are happy paying whatever fee they need to get their kind of proofs on chain, to get their batches of transactions on chain and their data, they're going to be happy to pay that. But at the same time, this is all just on kind of like one chain, one ETH1 chain, or one ETH kind of like shard right now. When we do have sharding implemented in probably early 2023, when we have 64x the capacity, especially for layer 2s, you're going to see in aggregate the transaction fees go much higher, but it's not like these L2s are going to be having to pay like $50,000 per batch or something crazy like that. They're going to have much more room to kind of batch on chain. And the fees that they pay may only be a few dollars to start with, but the thing is, there's going to be lots of these L2s, there's going to be lots of these kind of like other actors that take advantage of this extra space, and that's going to, I guess, get this fee volume up even more. So I fully believe within the next 5 years, we can see daily fee revenue go to $1 billion. And when you think about it, that's quite crazy, because that's like what, 70 to 80% of that is going to be burned, right? As ETH. Now, of course, ETH could be $50,000 in 5 years, for example, right? So the amount of ETH being burned will be less than it is today if we had the same kind of like fee revenue in dollars, because it's obviously denominated in ETH. But I mean, the trend is up, and given the amount of economic value that's on Ethereum, the amount of economic actors there are, the amount of people playing there, especially the fact that like whales don't care about fees at all. Like I've never met a whale that's ever complained about the fee. Sometimes you'll see. Actually, I remember some people that I know are whales have kind of like said, even as a whale, the fees are annoying. But it doesn't matter if they're annoying, they're still paying them. Like there are people out there most people out there that aren't whales, it is both annoying and they're actually priced out as well. They actually can't pay these fees. And as you guys know, we're scaling via layer 2s, I should say. And layer 1 will just be the security and settlement layer. And that's totally fine. I think layer 2s are already having, I'm going to talk about layer 2's growth later on, but they're already having such amazing growth given how early we are. And I think that layer 1, all the new users coming in now, or most of them, are not touching layer 1 Ethereum anymore. They go into these layer 2s, which is exactly what we want. And I actually believe that it's good that the fees are high because of that as well. I mean, it means that users don't actually have to ever go to layer 1 Ethereum. So they don't, like, for example, imagine a new user today coming in, and imagine if the layer 1 fees were low. Say it was like under 5 Gwei or something like that. And then they went on layer 1, they did all their stuff there, but then the fees spiked up to 50 Gwei. Well, now that user may be stuck, right? Or maybe trapped. We don't want that for new users at all. So the fact that they get to start on layer 2, where everything is just like really, really cheap compared to layer 1, and they're not going to get trapped because those layer 2 scale a lot better. And, in their final form, the current L2s in their final form, and this form is final as the tech currently stands, it's not final long term, but in their current forms, across all of them, we could have 5,000 transactions per second. We're not going to hit that anytime soon on these L2s. Not on the generalized ones, at least. The ones that need that much TPS probably going to go as kind of like a single app chain, something like DYDX or something like that. But from that perspective, I'm really glad that the fees. I mean, it's funny because like if I say I'm really glad that the fees are pricing people out of layer 1, it may sound like I'm really glad that people can't interact with Ethereum layer 1, but I'm really glad that it's happened now, so that when we do have kind of like, I guess, more of right now we're in the early adopter phase, but when we do have the mass adoption phase happen, which hasn't happened yet, we will know when it happens, but it's not yet. But when it does happen, I want all those users going to layer 2. I don't want them getting trapped on layer 1. I don't want them having to experience high fees or anything like that. And I'm sure none of you do either. So that's what I kind of like think about from that perspective as well. But I'm going to move on from that for now. Got a bunch of other stuff to get through. So I guess I should start with this. No, I should start with this tweet. So this tweet from Immutable, there's two here, and that's why I was getting confused between the two. But they announced that artists and developers can now officially start launching their own NFT drops by using the SuperFarm platform on Immutable with zero gas fees, 100% carbon neutrality, and world-class user experience, all powered by Immutable X, built on Starkware, secured by Ethereum. The holy grail, guys. You know, I mean, I know Immutable X is not a rollup, a ZK rollup. It is a Validium, but it's still better than kind of like these side chains and things like that. So really, really glad to see this. Really glad to see that people can just like easily launch their own NFT drops now, because as I've said plenty of times before, NFTs are the thing that are going to bring in the most people in. We need them on the most scalable ecosystems ASAP. We don't want to wait around, and we don't want to push more people to kind of like layer ones, because NFTs are actually really expensive on layer one. But yeah, really cool to see this. And the second thing from Immutable is that they've processed nearly 1 million Gods Unchained NFT trades on Immutable X. 883,000 trades exactly. Average cost of trading is 0.01 ETH. The average gas fee of trading an NFT in Gods Unchained alone, the L2 has saved users 8,830 ETH, or $37 million, all with ETH security. That's insane, right? Like, when you really do quantify the numbers around how much gas is being saved by batching up all these transactions on layer 2s, it is just crazy. It's seriously crazy. And the thing is that you guys know that this is part of the modular architecture where we take execution and computation off-chain, because that just has no real reason to be on-chain, on layer 1. It's incredibly inefficient to make all nodes throughout the network process these sorts of things, and it's incredibly expensive as well, as we've seen. But just quantifying it and putting actual dollar values towards it and ETH values on it is crazy, because I mean, $37 million, that's what, right now, that's pretty much what the daily fee revenue is for Ethereum. And this is just one app. So if all of these trades were done on layer 1, it would have cost $37 million in gas fees. Now, you could argue that these trades would never have even happened. And that's what we mean by layer 2's unlocking new economic activity, is that there was no way that you would have these trades happen on layer 1. It doesn't make sense, because most of the Gods Unchained cards are not actually worth that much. They may be worth way less than what the gas fees are required to pay. So Immutable X is actually unlocking this latent economic activity that people have quite literally been priced out of doing, which again is worth, to me, it's worth even more than the fees, because it means that we are basically creating new value instead of just taking the existing value from layer 1 to layer 2. And that's what I'm most bullish on about the layer 2s, is that they're creating new value, new economic activity. They're not just taking the activity off layer 1 and putting it on layer 2. And that's another reason why I've kind of said in the past before that even if most users migrate off of layer 1 to layer 2, it's not going to significantly decrease the gas fees on layer 1, because we're going to both be unlocking new activity and new economic activity, and we're also going to be replacing layer 1 user transactions with layer 2 rollup transactions, such as the proofs, the batches, and the call data. And the data. And then from that point of view, you just can view layer 2s as users, but they're much more efficient users. They batch their transactions, they process them off-chain, they do BLS signature aggregation on them in order to compress them. So from that point of view, the layer 2s are just a much better, much more efficient user of Ethereum block space than you or I are. Like, we can never be that efficient. It's just not something that we can do. We could do it if we started our own layer 2, but then it doesn't really make economical sense, because we'd still have to be paying kind of like those fees, the minimum fees, as call data, and it will still be too expensive for individuals. But L2s act, as I've said before, as a user wrapper, and they're like a super user, essentially, which I think is a really cool way to think about it. But I'm most bullish on these L2s unlocking new economic activity for Ethereum, rather than extracting it from layer 1 and putting it on layer 2. Some of that will happen, but it's more that 90+% of the activity that happens on L2s will be new economic activity, I think. So speaking of layer 2s and what I spoke about last week about Worldcoin, I did talk about what technology they're using, which is the Hubble optimistic rollup. And in this tweet thread from Bartek, he goes through how Hubble actually differs from other optimistic rollups such as Optimism and Arbitrum. Now, I have said before that I think there's only going to be two generalized optimistic rollups that actually succeed long term, and I think that those are Optimism and Arbitrum, of course, because I mean there are other teams out there, but they're forks. Like there's Metis, Nami, and Boba Network. I'm not 100% about Nami, but I know the other two are actually just forks of Optimism. And I actually believe that Nami is as well, but I'm kind of like I'm kind of like bullish on like the non-forks, right, and the ones with kind of like much more of an ecosystem, more of the apps deploying to them, which is what Optimism and Arbitrum have right now. But in saying that, the Hubble optimistic rollup is actually payments focused, so that's why again, like as I mentioned last week, they can have cheaper fees than the other optimistic rollups, but they also do a bunch of other things as well, which you can actually read in this thread from Bartek. I'm not going to go over this. I want to get through the rest of the stuff I have today, but definitely check out this thread. I think it's really cool that this is happening. I think it's really cool. I mean, this is the only thing about Worldcoin that I actually like. I actually hate everything else about it, as I explained last week. But like the fact that they're using Ethereum and they're using optimistic rollup is cool. They're innovating there, but the rest of Worldcoin leaves much to be desired. That's for sure. All right, so another banger post from Polynya, and this isn't about really modular blockchains here. This is about what Polynya is calling the transaction quality trilemma. And they on Twitter, they shared the post by saying, with low transaction fees, we have a transaction quality problem with bots and spam infesting these networks. There doesn't seem to be a solution other than increasing fees, or is there? Highly recommend giving this post a read, of course. But essentially, the trilemma is this kind of like triangle, and each edge of the triangle you have censorship resistance, low fees, and spam. You can only have two of three. This is kind of similar to the scalability trilemma. So essentially, if you have low fees, you'll have and spam, you can't really have censorship resistance. And then, you know, I mean, you can pick any two here, and then it kind of like makes sense from there. But then in this post, Polynya basically goes on to explain, like, you know, what are the networks that have kind of like experienced this before? What are the trade-offs? What can we do to preserve all three? Is it solvable? All that sort of things, all that sort of stuff. And they use the example of the Polygon POS chain, which, as I mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago, they increased the gas fees on their network to 30 Gwei. Now, this is Gwei measured as the Matic price, not as the ETH price. So 30 Gwei for Matic price is considerably less than in ETH price, because obviously Matic is like under $2, ETH is over $4,000, so it doesn't make sense to compare the two. But that was still 30 times higher than before. So if your transaction fee was like 1/10 of a cent, your transaction fee is now 3 cents, right? Because it's 30 times more expensive. Now, the reason that they did this was because of spam. There was so much spam on the network because it was just so cheap to transact on it that they had to do something to kind of like alleviate this. And by increasing the gas prices up, this alleviated that. Now, obviously, that is not the ideal solution, but it is one solution. And I actually think it's probably the best solution. I've said before that I think there's a sweet spot for fees. At the end of the day, I don't think you can have basically like transaction fees that are so low that it encourages spam and DOS attacks, because you get what happened with Solana the other day, right? They basically suffered a DOS attack where the network went offline for 18 hours because it's just so cheap for bots to spam the network that they had a flood of like 400,000 transactions during one of these. I think it was an NFT drop, or maybe I think it was like an ICO or an IDO or something like that. But they had a flood of these transactions in, and it basically DOSed the network and kicked some validators off, which made the network kind of like halt and go offline. Now, the way that they've mitigated that, from my understanding, I don't know if it's currently in place, but I think it is that they actually do a quality of service where they drop transactions that they actually suspect as being spam. Now, if you're doing that, I mean, it's kind of subjective, right? Like, you can use different heuristics to see what transactions are spam and which are not. But at the same time, like, you're taking, I guess, I mean, this goes beyond the technical stuff now. You're basically choosing what transactions get to go into the network or not. Now, this is obviously not great for censorship resistance, because essentially, if your transaction is being dropped because it's suspected of being spam, it may not be direct censorship, because there's not someone basically saying, well, I know this transaction isn't really spam, but I'm going to drop it anyway and flag it as spam. There may be some instances of that, but most of the time it's not that. But essentially, you're indirectly being censored here, and that's not what we want either. So there is a happy medium, which I think Polynya discussed in here, but still, there's a trade-off no matter what way you go about it. I actually don't think there's a perfect solution here. You can have ultra low fees and not have to and still and kind of like have spam, or you can have like higher fees, less spam, but a worse user experience because they have to pay a little bit more fees. It's very hard to get all three. Yeah, maybe we'll figure it out in the future, but it is definitely not easy to do so. Now, layer 2s actually have a better, layer 2s actually suffer from the same problem as something like a Solana, where their transactions are like really, really, really cheap. And, you know, the layer 2 can fall over as well. You can DOS this. If there's only one sequencer, you can DOS it and you can send it offline because of the fact that you're flooding the kind of like the sequencer with transactions because it's just so cheap to do it, and they just kind of go offline from there. So again, you need this healthy balance. And you know, another way to do it is to decentralize the sequencers as well, have many people running them. But again, if they're publicly known, you can just DOS all of them essentially if you want to. So I mean, I recommend giving this piece a read, but it's another thing to think about, and it's actually very important. And this is why I've said that I think that layer 1 is fine being expensive because it actually mitigates this completely. To DOS Ethereum right now, by doing like a transaction flood, I mean, it's stupid expensive. You can't even do it. Like the cheapest transaction you can do on Ethereum is an ETH transfer, and even that's expensive right now, right? I think it's like I mean, the last time I checked, even it's a few dollars at 50 Gwei. Good luck DOSing the network by spamming it with ETH transactions. It's not going to work because there's just so much. It's so expensive to do, and also the network is conservative because of that, because the gas limit's lower than what it can be. So there's always a happy medium, a happy kind of like medium here. But the way I would prefer it is that layer 1 stays, I mean, I guess like expensive, right? It stays maximally decentralized and secure, and because of that, it's expensive to use. But we won't suffer from DOS attacks. We won't suffer from spam bloat or kind of like really, really bad state bloat, and we keep it easy for people to run their own nodes, which is critically important in my eyes. Then we can handle all these kind of like other stuff at layer 2, which is just a much better path to go down in my kind of view here. But when you guys know, I'm basically a L2 maximalist at this point, so I'm not going to try and convince you further there. But moving on, a bit of a different kind of like tune here. So Manifold announced a kind of new service called Royalty Registry, which is basically a service to make on-chain royalties really simple. So they say here, royalties are a big part of the NFT ecosystem, but they can be confusing and painful to manage, and that's what they aim to change with this new service. They've collaborated with OpenSea Foundation, Nifty Gateway, Rarible, and SuperRare to simplify this entire process. So what they launched on, I guess, like October 23rd last week, a set of smart contracts that act as a registry to manage and look up on-chain royalties and on a contract and per token basis. A website that will allow everyone to configure and manage royalty info for all smart contracts and tokens. The registry provides a central lookup location along and standardizes the lookup for the myriad of different royalty specs and implementations. Any market will be able to look up royalties and pay out accordingly. This is really cool. I mean, obviously a big, I guess, portion of NFTs, or a big draw of NFTs, especially for artists or like creators, is that they're able to simplify the royalty process and get royalties for their work as well. But if there's no standard, I guess, kind of like royalty process here, then what ends up happening is that there just becomes a mess, right? There's no kind of like registry, there's no kind of like central place for you to look up these royalties and things like that. So I thought this is a really cool release from Manifold here. Onto L2s again. So Arbitrum announced that they now have the permissionless bridging is now open on their Arbitrum 1 network. So essentially, by default, any ERC20 token on L1 that isn't registered to a gateway can be permissionlessly bridged to the standard ERC20 gateway, which is the standard kind of like, I guess, L1 bridge for Arbitrum in. And you can kind of like read more about the technical details here and how this all works. But what this really means for, I guess, like end users is that you don't have to worry about your token not being supported by the gateway or the bridge now. Everything can be permissionlessly supported. So you can have like any token going from anywhere, which I think is really, really cool. All right, so another thing that was introduced last week is something called Seismo, which describes themselves as a way to build up your Ethereum profile or your ENS with anonymized attestations created from your other accounts. So essentially, they're using zero-knowledge proofs, as far as I know here. to basically do this. And I guess like the way it works, and they've got like a bunch of use cases here, but the way it works is that Seismo issues badges, non-transferable NFTs, to your public Ethereum profiles or ENS name. They are zero knowledge attestations of facts imported from your other accounts, Ethereum accounts, as well as Twitter or GitHub. You can aggregate your reputation with confidentiality to your public profile. This is really cool. I mean, this is again what I consider Web3, and how I said that we're still in the early stages of Web3, but there's a lot of really cool innovations here that are coming, especially around ENS, around signing with Ethereum, around NFTs and zero knowledge proofs and all that sort of stuff. And you can see the use cases. One of them is accessing a token-gated communities privately. Another one is aggregating a DeFi score. Like I'm sure some of you have seen like the DGen score before. Another one is better governance as well. So in this example, taking the Aave community as an example, you can mint via Seismo a ZK badge, an Aave community member badge, corresponding to someone that holds more than 100 Aave, voted on 10 plus proposals, or created a proposal. You can use it on Twitter via displaying your .eth name on the Aave governance forum when proposing, or in custom snapshot voting strategies. It will prove you have skin in the game and reveal no more than that, which in layman's terms is really cool, because it basically means that you can prove that you have more than 100 Aave, but you don't have to actually show the address that 100 Aave is on, which I think is is really, really cool. It means you can keep your addresses separate but still prove things, which is obviously there's a lot of use cases for. So really, really cool thing here from Seismo. All right, finally, TVL, it's an imperfect metric. I've talked about it before, how I don't like it to kind of like measure anything other than vanity. But still, I put out a tweet today that it's nice to see layer 2s on Ethereum cross the $4 billion TVL mark. Now, I got this from L2beat.com, one of my favorite websites for tracking all of this growth. You can see here that Arbitrum still accounts for the majority at 2.47 billion locked. DYDX is at 955 million, so almost a billion there. Optimism coming in third at 273 million. Loopring with 125 million, and then the long tail here. This is going to keep exploding up in TVL. I mean, obviously in kind of like fees on the networks as well, which Arbitrum and Optimism is still hovering around $100,000 every 24 hours. And then you've also got like the transactions on the networks, the users, they're all trending up. Like you can go check out the stats. I'm going to go over them on the next data pump. I'm going to try to do the data pump this weekend. I know I've promised that like for so often, but I'm going to try and do it this weekend. But still, cool to see this. I know a lot of people are going to view this, even though I think TVL is an imperfect metric. People are going to view this and think that, wow, okay, L2s are legit. I'm going to go use it. I'm going to bridge my assets across, or I'm a developer. I'm going to deploy my project on one of these networks. So I think that as a vanity metric, it works really well. But beyond that, not really, because the TVL is going to go up with the prices going up. And you can see here, there's a lot of ETH in these L2s right now. I mean, I think if I'm reading this correctly, there's 1 million ETH in these L2s. So if ETH goes up 10%, well, the TVL is going to go up probably 10% as well, since most of the value is ETH. So from that perspective, and that doesn't have to do anything else. Like the networks don't have to grow in volume, in users, in transactions. It's just purely kind of like a numbers game, which is fine. But as I said, it's an imperfect metric. That's why I don't really like using it too often, but still cool to see L2s continuing to grow. No surprise there, of course. But on that note, I'm going to leave it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.